Okay, Daryl, it's good seeing you again, and we're going to share some history of Orange County harbors, beaches, and parks, or whatever it is now. I believe it's OC Parks, yes. Okay, you know what, I never did find out about your family history. How did you arrive in this part of the country?
Well, it's kind of interesting. My folks lived in Orange County when I was young. We moved from Los Angeles County, and we did spend a lot of time coming to this very park, Irvine Regional Park, and O'Neill Park. Those are the two parks that I only really knew for quite a long time. But that was the chosen thing that my folks liked to go to. In fact, we used to picnic right on the other side of the creek when you could drive your car and do that, because my dad didn't want to be anywhere near anybody else. But he worked for the county at that time, so it made sense.
Oh, what did he do for the county?
He actually worked for the coroner's office. So he worked for the coroner's office back in the early 60s as an investigator. Then we moved overseas. He actually worked for the U.S. State Department. And then when we came back, he came back to work for Orange County, and then that became part of the Sheriff's Department. So I got to meet all the Sheriff's deputies personally. They used to drive me home every time something was going on about a mile away. So, having said that, how I got to working for Harbors, Beaches, and Parks, my time with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks was split into two different type of categories. You had the time where I worked as a park attendant and then as a groundskeeper, and then I left that to work for another county department, the probation department. And then after about 15 years, I was looking at changing. So I actually started working, I started looking at different opportunities. I thought, well, maybe I should go back to the parks. I enjoyed it. And I had talked to Tim Miller, who was the superintendent at that time, somebody that I had actually met while at Featherly as a groundskeeper, which I know that's where we first met.
Yes, yes.
And I spent time as a park attendant and then as a groundskeeper. And I enjoyed working there, but I did go to the probation department for 15 years. I thought, well, that might be a long-term career for me. It was for about 15 years, and then I decided that I needed to change. And I had called up Tim Miller, who was the superintendent at that time, and he said, well, we just had a park ranger recruitment, and so I missed that. But we had another opportunity, which was as a Ranger Reserve. And I never knew about the Ranger Reserve program, so he explained that to me and thought that might be a nice way to bolster my resume.
Did you go to school or get a degree?
Yeah, I have a degree in social sciences, sociology. But then when I was talking to Tim about becoming a reserve ranger, I ended up going back to school and getting a certificate in environmental science. So I figured that might help change in a career. And ultimately, my career choice was made the fact that I ended up retiring from the county, and I stayed as a reserve ranger for 5 years.
Well,
so
that's what got you here with us.
So tell us about how your family history and how you started working at Harbors, Beaches, and Parks.
Well, my Irish side of the family, my mother's side, moved from Boston, Massachusetts in 1929 and landed in Fullerton. And they were Irish Catholics and very active in the Catholic Church, so we knew the Yorbas up in the Anaheim Hills, and The church picnics were all here at Irvine Park. All the family picnics were here. And I can safely say that I was here before I was born because my mother went to this park when she was pregnant with me. And and my mother, of course, when she arrived, she was only 2 years old. So her grade school and high school years were many, many days spent here. And she told me about the ballroom that used to be attached to the band shell that you see out there. There was a huge ballroom, and she went to dances there when she was in her teens. Unfortunately, when the Army took it over in World War II, which was 1941, the ballroom part burned down, so all we have left is the band shell, and yeah, my mother was not very happy about that. But, and then my dad, he arrived a bit late after World War II. He arrived in Whittier in 1948 or so, and then met my mom, and then that story was written. And so I do have a picture of my mother and my sister and I in one of the old rowboats in 1954, 4th of July. Got the cannon in the background and everything. So yeah, it's I can prove I was here when I was very young anyway. But so I'm rarer than hen's teeth because, as Stinson would say, one of our famous old rangers, because I was actually born in Orange County. And really never left it. We bounced around for quite a few years and wound up settling in San Clemente in 1960, and then finished high school there, and then got my, well, I started off as a chemistry major at UCLA, dropped out, became a political science major at Saddleback, and then went on to Cal State Fullerton, got my degree in cultural anthropology and a teaching credential, 6th through 12th grade. And so I finished all that up about 1974, and unbeknownst to me, there'd been a demographic change, and the birth rate had dropped, and there was schools closing now because there were not enough kids to teach. They were laying teachers off, so I picked the wrong time to become a teacher. And I've talked to a number of, in fact, some of our colleagues here went through the same experience. So I was at a loss what I was going to do, and I had heard of a groundskeeper opening with Orange County Harbors, Beaches, and Parks, and I put in an application and went in on a federal program called CETA, and was hired as a groundskeeper and set out to O'Neill Park in March of 1976. That's my inception date. And I went to work at O'Neill Park and showed up there in the morning, and there was this kind of really hard, steely-eyed looking guy not looking too happy with me as soon as I arrived. And he was the person I was reporting to, the maintenance ranger at the time, Harley Hunnell. And I guess he had maybe somebody else in mind for that groundskeeper slot. So he let me know I needed to work hard, really hard. And he made sure I did and gave me some great assignments with some great people. My first person I worked with was Stinson, one of our venerable rangers. We just lost him last year. He was a great man, and we made a good team. And Harley saw that I liked to work, and so he actually put Stinson and I, after 3 months of grueling labor, he placed Stinson and I in charge of the summer youth program kids, where we would go down to Santa Ana in 13 passenger vans, pick up 13 socioeconomically disadvantaged youth, and take them out to O'Neill Park and put them to work on projects. Well, my problem was I had no construction skills. I didn't know how to make cement out of anything, so Stinson had incredible construction skills, incredible supervisory skills, and so he led the way there. And of course, me being a happy college graduate, I could do paperwork all day long, and so I took care of the administrative end, and we had a successful program, and that helped, I believe, get me promoted to ranger in 6 months as a groundskeeper. And my timing improved because in '76 they opened a a number of new parks. I heard it was something like 4 or 5 new parks in '76. I know they finished Villa Park here. I think Yorba opened, Clark Park. A bunch of new parks. So more jobs for park rangers, and that's how we got my start.
Yeah, I know at O'Neill Park, when you talk about building trails and stuff, after I had left being a groundskeeper at Featherly, and I was working for the probation department, I was working up at Joplin Youth Center, which is nearby O'Neill Park.
Right.
And I used to bring crews down to work on the trails and rebuild them. And
What years was that?
that would have been during the 80s, early 1980s.
Okay.
So between 81 and, it would have gone into to the mid-90s.
Okay, well, that's. I think that's when I went up to visit you. Was in the early '90s when when I was assigned to O'Neill Park, '91 to '93 as a supervising ranger, and Al Macias and I went up to see you at Joplin.
You guys were scouting out potential properties the county was looking at.
And would have liked to have had that one.
There's some excellent properties that that are in next to the national forest that the county is. Some of those properties they've acquired over the years, and other ones that they missed out on. But definitely some. The national forest has pockets of privately held land.
Right.
And,
Epidel Carrizo, Los Pinos, and all that.
I've spent a lot of time with the national forest. And that's one of the biggest issues that they've always had is those pockets. But it's nice to see that the county was interested in acquiring some of those to keep it natural land.
Excellent. That was a good mission. Well, I'll go ahead and. So, how did you? When did you decide to apply as a reserve?
Well, as a reserve ranger, I actually started in 1992. So I was part of what's called Class 6, and the program involved a lot of training. I forgot how many hours now, but Tom Clems was supervising that program's training, and we learned how to be park rangers, maybe in the proper way.
Well, good point. When I was promoted ranger in 1976, I had no experience in that, in the visitor field, law enforcement, or anything. So basically, it was on-the-job training once you were promoted from a groundskeeper to ranger. And I was assigned to Irvine Park on Labor Day of 1976, and I remember my supervising ranger at the time, Jerry Lahart. I reported to him on Friday before Labor Day, and he said, "Mark, here's the keys. The sheriffs are down at the interpretive center. If you have a problem, call them, and I'll see you next week." And so that was my introduction to park rangering at Irvine Park.
Well, I know at Featherly, when I was a groundskeeper there, because a lot of people had gotten hired on or promoted to park ranger, that was one of their first assignments. And definitely the learning on the job. With I know guys like Al Macias, Bob Doctor, all came through there.
Yeah.
And we had emergencies. I know when we had a big fire in the national forest, and they used Featherly as a fire camp. We had an interesting time getting people out of a fully packed park.
Yes.
While the fire equipment was rolling in, and we ended up having a jam up that was just terrible. And finally, we were able to tell some people, well, wait a half hour. Your evacuation isn't an emergency. We need it as a fire camp. So we worked that out, and that actually worked out pretty well. I ended up spending a lot of time directing traffic and sucking in a lot of diesel fuel fumes from trucks and RVs.
Now, what year was that fire camp?
That would have been, I'm thinking 1980.
Okay, yeah, it must have been, yeah, because I'd left there in '79 and I missed that fire camp, but that was always an interesting event for all us park rangers because of the agreement that, you know, parks in the area where a fire's being fought becomes a fire camp, and then the rangers go into support mode on it. And most of the fire camps I worked were just, you know, pretty simple, you know, evacuate everybody, turn it into fire camp like you described. But when I was a Ranger 2 in 1981 at Carbon Canyon Park, I called in a fire that I saw a little smoke plume to the northeast of the park, and I could draw a straight line from that smoke plume to my nose with the Santa Ana winds that were blowing at 9 o'clock in the morning, probably 40, 50 miles an hour. And so the fire camp started setting up. Our manager, Kurt Britton, responded and was on site. And then probably by about 10 o'clock or so, I didn't see any fire apparatus in the park. And was standing out in the road looking where, everything was. And all of a sudden, even though the fire was just cresting the hills, maybe about a half a mile away, the palm trees right across Carbon Canyon Road from the entrance of the park were exploding into flames and sending out, flying firebrands everywhere. So before I was ever notified the fire camp had bugged out, we were surrounded by flames, and basically, we just had the entire crew drive all the county vehicles down to the pond there at Carbon Canyon Park at the little pond. It happened so fast this time we couldn't even evacuate the horses from across the street over to the tennis courts, which had happened before, and so it was just a miracle they survived. But by 10 or 11, it was pitch black, dark as could be, and I looked across the park, kind of the east, and you could see this little dot of burning lights, and it was my whole split rail fence, burning very evenly in the flames in a pitch black background. But in fact, we had some assistance. Tom Clems, who was a ranger at at Craig Park at the time, came over and got to witness the entire event, so it was something to see. But fortunately, we didn't lose any buildings. I took volunteers up to our maintenance yard because the fire was coming down towards the dam road, but it was going downhill, so it was burning pretty slow, but it was coming. And one of my maintenance workers, Julio Ayala, a Vietnam vet, very, very heroic man, came up with the idea of why don't we go out on the dam road, and that's dam as in a storage reservoir, and just in case. So we had these big Rainbird 65s pointing downhill, and that means a 65-foot radius. These are big sprinklers. And so Julio says, let's get out there and turn those sprinklers uphill and just turn them on, because we had a restroom right up against that hill and the dam road right there. And so we did, and we were hosing down the maintenance building, and so, by the time the flames were coming down, we all backed away and went down by the pond until the fire had burned out. So when we got back to the maintenance building, it was spared, and that whole hillside had burned right down to the edge of the road, except for this big green strip where the bathroom was right there at the edge that, Julio had thought of pointing the sprinklers at. So we didn't lose any structures in that fire, and nobody was hurt. So that was a good outcome, considering how it may not have been so great.
Well, I know in the 93 fire, I used to spend a lot of time between Aliso and Wood Canyons Park and Laguna Woods, Laguna Canyon. And after the fire, it had decimated that park so much, we didn't even go in there for quite a while. But we started doing patrols, and where you used to only see a few yards because of the growth, now you're seeing miles. And we spent time repairing fences and so forth. Just in all the gates, you'd have a metal gate that was, just sort of sitting there, because the posts that they were mounted to were gone.
Yeah, usually railroad ties or something that had just disintegrated.
And but the experience of seeing that fire, because I didn't live too far from it, so I was watching from home. But just seeing the growth that it took for about 2 years after, just to get it to revitalize, and so forth. But the things you saw after the fire were incredible. Flowers that hadn't been seen in 40 years.
Yeah, well, that's one of the characteristics of chaparral is some of the plants actually need fire to germinate and be healthy and all that. Well, that 93 fire, that burned down almost 400 houses in Laguna Beach. And it was just astounding because I'd just been transferred down to South Beaches, and I'm sitting there, wow, whew, no more fire camps. And yeah, I mean, how can the beach burn? Well, it didn't burn, but I did become a fire camp because Aliso Beach became a fire camp for the 93 fire in Laguna Beach. So we were still in the business.
Well, I know with the 93 fire, Larry Sweet was at that park, and when I first started going there as a reserve ranger, I was with another reserve ranger, and he asked us this, well, do you want to have the tour, or do you want to learn about the park? The difference being that I'll spend a little time with you and give you the Disney tour, or you can actually learn how to do the job. I opted for the job. My feeling was that if as a reserve ranger, even though I was a volunteer, I wanted to do as much as I possibly could, and I wanted to do it in the most realistic way, which meant I had to get my hands dirty. Being that was just before the fire and then afterwards, it was an experience because you had people that were mountain bikers that were running in and out of the park. And where you wouldn't have seen them before, you suddenly could see them for a long ways away.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they would see you, and they would see this truck coming down the trail. And in one case, where there was a group of 5 guys, it took us a while to get up to them, and they decided to make their own trail going down the side of the canyon. And one by one, they would hit things, and they would tumble. One made it to the road. But I do recall being up on the ridge looking down, and they were raising their fists and hooting and hollering because they beat the ranger. Mark, what are some of the funny things you encountered while working and dealing with visitors in the parks?
Well, visitors, I didn't have a lot of what you might call funny encounters. Because usually at busy parks, when you're having your encounters, it's going to be more guidance and advisory oriented. And but I have some great memories of some sites that I'll never forget at the Orange County Zoo when I was working for Harley Hunnell. It was more of a deer pen type thing than the zoo that we have developed now, and we had this big goose, an African gray goose named George, and when I first got there, Harley said, "Hey, you got to come over and see this." He says, "You see that goose over there with the deer? He's always with a deer. He thinks he's a deer." And then he starts calling for George, and George all of a sudden looks at us, us humans, and just starts waddling and honking all the way over, and comes up to the fence and just starts like chatting with us goose style. And then when he's done with you, he went back to the deer herd, and he was part of the fallow deer herd. Now the other great memory I have is of this llama that we'd gotten for the deer pen. Somebody had donated him, and Harley had accepted it. And one day I saw him over there, looking at Bruce, the llama, and I guess for some reason Bruce didn't like Harley, so he spit at him, and that was strike one for Bruce. Then another day, Harley was, trying to figure him out, and Bruce got a hold of his Stetson and chewed it up. Well, that was about it for Bruce. Strike two, and well, he was donated to a Riverside zoo that when we never saw Bruce again.
Back in 1995, 96, I was, the summertime was August. So we're talking about late August. It's about 105 degrees. It's loose on Wood Canyons Park. And at that time, we had a small mobile building as an office, no electricity, no water, sort of the Gilligan's Island of park offices. And a gentleman came running down Wood Canyon, and he's just panting, and he's tired, and he's almost kind of a panic sound. There was a mountain lion, a mountain lion. And I had been trained to, methodically have them describe what they saw, and he did. He described a perfect mountain lion. I said, okay. It was up at Gate 5, which in Wood Canyon, Gate 5 was the remnant of East Road that went to Molten Peak. And he apparently was up to the top of that gate. So I said, well, let's get into the truck, and we drove on. And we go up Wood Canyon, then up the trail to Gate 5, and it's a winding road. It goes around a hill. And I stopped. I said, well, is that what you see? He says, I don't see anything. I said, so we got a little bit closer. I said, stop the vehicle. I said, is that it? He says, yes, yeah. Roll the windows up. It's going to attack us. I said, you sure? You sure that's the animal you saw? He says, oh, absolutely. That's it. It's dangerous. It almost attacked me. I ran, and it's like a mile and a half from where he was to where he caught up with me. So I looked at it again, got out of the truck, whistled. Here, boy. Turns out it was a gold retriever. Fortunately, the dog did have tags. We rescued the dog. We called the owner. They went farther up, got the guy's mountain bike, and then on the whole way back, he said, well, maybe that wasn't it. I said, well, the important thing is we got your bike. You didn't have to run back for another mile and a half. The importance of identifying what you're seeing, what people will tell you and what reality is doesn't always match up.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it seems some people just want to see a mountain lion. I had an incident at Dana Point Harbor in the mid-'90s, and I had a call to the office that 2 mountain lions had been spotted playing on the bluffs above the Marine Institute. And so, really, I decided, yes, I better go investigate this. And there they were, 2 little tabby cats jumping around up at the upper parts of the bluff. And, actually I could understand, they had no perspective and couldn't tell the size of those two domestic short-haired cats that maybe resembled the color of a mountain lion. But yeah, we went into full mode until I personally identified them as domestic cats.
And talking about Wood Canyon, Tom Maloney, who was the ranger in charge at that time, during the week he had been up on the below the top of the world, the sandstone area.
Right.
And years ago, there had been a very large blue peace sign. And I knew that because when I was in the Marine Corps, I used to fly in and out of Marine Corps Air Station El Toro frequently. Uh-huh. And you would look out the window and you would see this big blue peace sign. Well, Tom had been up on this, and he was looking around, and he took a picture. And he shows me the picture, and it's a perfect shot of a mountain lion print in the blue paint. So you figure this peace sign had been there at least from the early 70s, because I saw it in 76. And it was just a wonderful preserved paw print. You couldn't have asked for better detail. Wow. So what I keep thinking is somebody put all this paint on the sandstone, and it was to let guys like me know that, they wanted love and peace in the world, which is, absolutely wonderful to aspire to. And they had this big peace sign for us to see. But yet, a few feet away from somebody putting blue paint on sandstone was a critter watching him do that paint work. Because as soon as he was done, he said, "Great job, I'm saving the world." Admires it for a few minutes probably, and then when he left, a mountain lion came over and went, "Nice job."
That was pretty soon after the paint had been laid down, so that's somebody got lucky.
Yeah.
Well, so you were in the Marine Corps for a while, huh?
I was. I actually joined the Marine Corps in 1975, and it was. I was in until 78 as in the regular Marine Corps, and then I went reserve for a couple of years. So by the time I met up with you, I was pretty much done with the Marine Corps. So I was, having some periodic straggle on my face. I don't think I was keeping a beard full time then.
No, it seems not to have damaged you too much.
Yeah, the experience in the Marine Corps was interesting. Some of that actually applies real well to working in parks. The understanding about emergency situations, like we've talked.
Right.
You have to keep calm, and if you panic, you're not of any value to anybody in the public.
Well, I'll say my teacher education program kind of helped me out with that, since I did my student teaching in Santa Ana, and what really helped was I was able to get involved with my education once I became a ranger. I was able to get involved with doing interpretive programs, developing programs, and that was one of the parts of the job that I really liked. Although what I really liked about the job was you did so many different things in a day. You're doing interpretive public contact, you're doing administration, you're counting money, you're doing, it's just like a different job every hour.
I've spent a couple of careers doing interpretive work, and it all goes back to working initially in the parks. When I was at Featherly, and Tim Miller was a ranger too at Featherly. He actually got me started doing interpretive programs.
Yeah, yes, Tim was the starter.
I never had done that before. I was nervous about it. He started having me do slideshows that he was doing, for the fire camp programs. And it was great because it's things that evolved into school programs and working, and even as a Ranger Reserve and in other careers that I've had. Being able to use those skills and that knowledge to bring programs to groups and individuals. It's been very rewarding.
Yeah, that's always one of my favorite parts. Was that when Tim brought over the Welcome Woody costume? Did you ever have any experience with the?
I wasn't too much into the Welcome Woody costume. The sign was there. We put that all the time. It was always there at the front gate.
Did you ever see the costume though?
Yeah,
well, that while I was Ranger 2 working for Tim at Carbon Canyon in the early '80s, he had these college students from Cal State Long Beach, which was his alma mater, and it's one of their programs for the Parks and Recreation degree. They created this Welcome Woody costume. And yes, I volunteered to wear it on my time off and help Stan Bankston and Tim with one of their programs there at Featherly. Well, what I discovered about that costume was it was a big round ball, and it was all latex rubber and stuff, and there was like one hole where you kind of looked out. What they neglected to do, as I found out half an hour later or so, as I was almost passing out, there was no air holes in that costume. And I said I will never wear that head again until somebody put some holes in it. And so they put holes in it. Well, Daryl, in our many years and many locations throughout Orange County, there has been one consistent question from the public that we've always been asked. And what is that?
Where's the bathroom?
And, well, at Irvine Park, what I liked about telling people where the restroom was is we had names for all our restrooms. If I was near the restroom by the zoo, that was known as the Bank of America restroom because it resembled a Bank of America, so that's where people went to make their deposits. We also had the largest restroom ever built in Orange County in the 20s, and that was Big Bertha. And so I could direct people to Big Bertha or the little twin to Bertha, Little Annie, a little further down. And then we also had Tennis Hill. So at Irvine Park, directing people to the bathrooms was almost fun because they always got a little laugh out of our nicknames for the bathrooms.